For 3 years, the global semiconductor industry has operated under a single rigid assumption. Without extreme ultraviolet lithography machines from the Netherlands, China's path to the 1.4 nanometer frontier was physically blocked. On Monday, at a technical symposium in Shanghai, Huawei presented a design framework that suggests the blockade may have been bypassed not by better hardware, but by changing the fundamental geometry of the chip itself. At the 2026 IEEE International Symposium on Circuits and Systems, the atmosphere was clinical until Tingbo, the president of HiSilicon, took the stage. For years, HiSilicon, Huawei's internal design arm, has been the tip of the spear for Chinese domestic chip development. They weren't there to announce a new machine or a trade deal. Instead, they unveiled what they call LogicFolding architecture and a new governing principle for semiconductors, the Tau scaling law. Since the 1970s, Moore's law has dictated that performance gains come from shrinking physical transistors. But as the industry approaches the 2 nanometer limit, the physics of light and heat are becoming insurmountable. Huawei's new Tau scaling theory argues that the future of performance is no longer about physical shrinkage, but about temporal scaling, prioritizing the speed of data movement and signal pathways over the size of the gates themselves. The central conflict is no longer just about who can buy the most advanced machines from ASML. It is about whether Huawei has found a mathematical and architectural loophole that allows them to produce high-density chips using the older, less restricted, deep ultraviolet lithography equipment they already possess. The stakes for this architectural pivot are existential for the Chinese tech sector. Current U.S. trade sanctions specifically restrict the export of EUV machines, which are required to print the ultra-fine features of 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer, and 2 nanometer chips. If Huawei is forced to play the traditional Moore's law game, they are effectively frozen in 2020. This technical ceiling affects everything from the next generation of AI data centers to the Mate 90 series smartphones planned to release this autumn. If the LogicFolding claims are exaggerated, Huawei remains a generation behind the West. If they are accurate, the entire logic of the U.S. export control regime, which is based on hardware bottlenecks, may have just been rendered obsolete. The core of the LogicFolding breakthrough is a dual-layer framework. Instead of spreading logic circuits across a flat plane, Huawei is physically stacking them. According to the data presented at ISCAS 2026, this stacking results in a 55% increase in transistor density and a 41% boost in power efficiency. By using 2 layers, Huawei can achieve the density of a much smaller node without needing the finer resolution of EUV machines. This matters because it changes the competitive math. Industry projections discussed at the symposium suggest that Huawei's upcoming architecture could reach a density of 238 million transistors per square millimeter. For context, TSMC's highly advanced N3P node sits at roughly 224 million. While these are projections, they indicate that Huawei is no longer aiming to simply catch up. They are attempting to leapfrog using a different dimension of design. The claim is backed by more than just theory. Huawei revealed that they have been refining this methodology in secret for 6 years. During that period, they claim to have mass-produced 381 test chips based on LogicFolding principles to validate the architecture. This suggests that the announcement isn't a speculative paper, but the culmination of a long-term engineering cycle that began shortly after the first major U.S. sanctions were imposed. The market reaction was immediate. Shares for SMIC, China's largest contract chip maker and the likely foundry for these designs, rose by 7.6% following the keynote. Investors are betting that SMIC can manufacture these folded designs using their existing DUV fleet. This manufacturing partnership is the critical link. If SMIC can successfully implement LogicFolding, they provide Huawei with a domestic manufacturing path that is immune to further lithography-based sanctions. The long-term roadmap presented by Tingbo is equally ambitious. Huawei is targeting 1.4 nanometer class density by the year 2031. Crucially, the plan involves scaling this architecture from mobile Kirin processors this year to their Ascend AI processors and data center chips by 2030. This indicates a unified architectural strategy across their entire product stack, moving away from Western-defined scaling laws entirely. However, every architectural leap comes with a physical cost. Stacking logic circuits vertically creates a massive thermal challenge. In a traditional chip, heat escapes from the top. When you stack a second layer of active logic on top of the first, you effectively trap the heat of the bottom layer. Skeptics in the industry point to China's history of exaggerated breakthroughs, such as the infamous Han-Shin or Power Star incidents. While Huawei's data is more robust, they have yet to explain how a dual-layer logic-folding chip will manage thermal dissipation in the cramped form factor of a smartphone without aggressive throttling. If the heat cannot be moved, the 41% efficiency gain exists only on paper. What we know for certain is that Huawei has officially pivoted its entire semiconductor strategy towards architectural innovation over lithographic shrinking. The Tau scaling law is a formal declaration that they are no longer competing for ASML's machines. The existence of 381 test chips suggests the methodology is functional, even if its mass market viability remains unproven. What remains contested is the yield rate. Producing a complex dual-layer folded architecture is significantly more difficult than standard 2D chips. Open sources suggest while SMIC can print these designs, the number of functional chips per wafer, the yield, will determine if the Mate 90 is a mass-market reality or a limited-run technical showcase. Until third-party benchmarking of the Kirin processors arrives this autumn, the true 1.4 nanometer class performance remains a projection. This story reveals a fundamental shift in the geopolitical tech race, the decoupling of hardware limits from architectural capability. If Huawei can successfully substitute geometry for lithography, the physical bottlenecks that the West has relied on to maintain a lead will lose their primary power. We are moving from an era defined by who has the best machines to an era defined by who has the most efficient spatial logic. If you found this breakdown of the shifting semiconductor landscape useful, please consider subscribing and liking the video. Given the thermal density of stacking two logic layers, do you believe SMIC's current DUV multi-patterning yields can support mass production for the Mate 90? Or is this architecture better suited for larger liquid-cooled AI server blades?